Lovely, thank you. And thank you so much for your patience. Sorry about the technical issues, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. What I really want to discuss today is actually the power that active learning has been shown to have in an area that I specialize in teaching in. So I teach a lot of statistics, I teach a lot of data sciences for biologists and biology students. And this is an area that students classically struggle with. And active learning has actually had some really quite interesting effects when used in combination with a few other things as well. So I've tried to make this a fairly active session. It's hosted on WooClap. So if you could please just use this QR code or follow this link to join the session, then you'll be able to participate with my slides. As you join, you should see that there's a reaction button, so you'll be able to react to slides as you come in, and you'll also be able to interact with some polls that I've set up and even message me through the app. So I can see we've got 6 people so far. Let's give it a little bit longer just in case anyone else is trying to join. Cool. Yay, people are testing the reaction. Love it. Awesome. People having fun with that. Love it. So first thing, and I really want you to be honest with me here, it's a little bit of word association. What do you think when you hear the words data, statistics, analysis, dread, oh God, yes, this is similar things to what my students come back with. Okay, a bit more of a reaction. So power, loving it, change, challenging. So this is much more mixed than the kinds of things I get from my students. Don't do numbers, a classic one. People think data equals maths. Maths is big and scary. I can't do that, run away. So there are some people here who are into the data, and that's lovely to see. But I wouldn't say that any of the more negative associations are rare or misplaced with what I see coming from my students. Now, this is the kind of word cloud that I'm really looking for. And this is like an aspirational word cloud I look to try and gather from my students. So I want them to be thinking, oh, data should be pretty, making pretty figures, getting those creative juices flowing on how to best present and make my data aesthetically pleasing. I want them to be thinking about the skills they're getting. Are those skills transferable? They absolutely are. And in the job market, there's some really valuable things that people look for. Same with problem solving. This is again a transferable skill that we use all the time when we're doing our analysis. And from the other angle, I teach in the biological sciences. We're constantly using these skills to answer the big questions in biology, which is a couple of degrees west of storytelling. And a really good data set will also tell a really good story if you've analysed it well. So tying those in together and starting to think of this as actually, I need these skills because they're important, but also if I want to address those large questions, if I want to tell that cool biological story, I need to get a good grip on this sort of thing. And that leads to higher levels of satisfaction. So this is very much a desirable word cloud. We're not there yet, but this is kind of where I'd like my students to be by the time they finish learning with me. So I took on data sciences in the first year 2 years ago. They're all level 4 students. There are about 200 of them, and they're either on courses for biology, biomedicine, or ecology. And when I first took this module on, it was very prescriptive. So lectures were where we learned statistics theory. And then we had workshops where we'd use point and click platforms, in this case SPSS, if anyone's familiar with that, to actually practice the method of data analysis. But the trouble with point and click that I've come across is that you click here, you click here, you click here, you click there, and then at the end of that you get some figures. Now, can you really remember where you clicked if that's the first time you've done it? And do you really, if you're being told to click here, click here, click here, click here, do you actually know why you're clicking on those things to produce that end result? It's very end goal focused, and it's very much like, well, I want this plot, but I'm not really thinking about why I want that plot. I just want it. So I'm going to click and do the necessary clicking I need to do to get that end product. And we were seeing increasingly that students were performing these analyses under guidance, but they didn't really know why they were performing them. And if you changed the data set or changed the questions, they didn't really know what they were doing. And they didn't really know how to even what they wanted as an end goal of that, let alone how to get to that end goal. So there's no problem solving going on here. They also became absolutely fixated on P is less than 0.05. And you'd get reports coming back with, oh, well, P was less than 0.05, so it's significant. And it's like, well, what does that mean? I need to have some context here. P is less than 0.05 in and of itself means nothing to anyone. It needs the context. And that's actually exciting stuff. So it's really driving that as well. And they'd spend ages developing this beautiful end product, and they'd learn some skills behind that. And it would equate to essentially creating a lovely campsite, getting everything in the right place, making it very homely, and then going off hiking and leaving it all behind. And that was what we were seeing increasingly between modules and within modules, as they were learning these skills supposedly, but they weren't taking them with them. And this is essentially what I suspect is a symptom of shallow learning. So we decided to move to a new text-based approach, in this case, to try to move on to R. And on the face of it, this doesn't actually look that different. Essentially, you're telling a computer, instead of click here, you're saying do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then this, and I get a nice plot. Fantastic. But you have to know what you're asking the computer to do if you're using a text-based approach. It's not a case of clicking where you know that you've been told to click. And also, at the end of that process, you will have been creating essentially a mini script. And that script doesn't go anywhere. That script remains yours after this. So you have a record there. You have a record of what you've done, which makes everything more reproducible. But you also have that as part of your portfolio, as it were. So if you need to do a similar analysis again, that's already logged like a lab book that you can go back to and use again and again and again with various manipulations where necessary. So we wanted to make this move towards this more text-based system in R. And we did get a little bit of pushback from that. There was a large amount of staff members, colleagues sort of saying, oh, well, you know, you're asking all these students to learn statistics, that's big and scary. And then you ask them to also learn a new programming language, which is in and of itself is big and scary. So, you know, how are you going to manage that from the student's point of view? So this is the strategy we really adopted here. We went for an unchanged approach to data science and statistics theory. This is still very much taught in lectures. But then we changed it from this idea of from point and click SPSS approach in workshops to text-based interface, RStudio in this case. And we moved that to actually largely asynchronous delivery with synchronized workshops. So students were expected to do a certain amount of work on their own time, guided, obviously, week on week on week. And then we have these workshops where they can get additional help where necessary and where they can just check in and we can see how they're getting on. And to do this, we made use of two key tools. We created and developed some interactive workbooks produced using Bookdown and published on GitHub. And we also made use of this piece of server-based use of RStudio, which is on Posit Cloud. I'm just going to walk you through these a little bit now. So the workbook was very deliberately written as a guide to talk these students through the full analysis of two data sets. And then at the end, it finishes by allowing them their own data set to conduct their own analysis on. And this is the assessed piece. And it starts off the beginning of semester 1 with full instruction, full guidance. They're told what they need to do. They're told to stop and think every now and then about what they're doing, but it's heavily guided. This level of guidance, as the year progresses, drops away to prompts and then to hints. And then at the end, they are going solo. And throughout this process, we are really encouraging students to leave comments on their own scripts. So that when they do come back, their future selves can be like, oh, I can't quite remember what this function does. Oh, but look, I've left a little comment for myself and it tells me that it does this. Okay, I can use that. I can manipulate it a little bit and use it again on my new piece of analysis. The other tool I mentioned was Posit Cloud. This is a really invaluable piece of software for teaching R, in my opinion. Essentially, it's server-based, remote server administrated version of RStudio. RStudio, if anyone who hasn't seen it, looks a little bit like this. It's just a nice interface for working in R. But because it's administrated remotely, it means the students can't do any damage to it. We don't have to worry about installations on their home computers. They can access it anywhere they need, provided they have the internet or on university computers, and all of the versions are maintained by those remote administrators. From the instructor's point of view, I can then share with my students pre-made projects. So if there are dependencies, if there are packages I need them to be using, I can install them in a pre-made project space and share that amongst my students. And the students can share their work back with me. They can invite me to look at their project. So if, for example, this is really helpful when inevitably you end up troubleshooting a piece of code. So they've tried again and again and again, it's still not working. In the old days of SPSS, I'd have had to arrange a meeting with these students. Now they can simply share their workspace with me. I can drop in remotely from wherever I am, have a look at their scripts and try and troubleshoot from wherever. So a really nice, really useful piece of equipment. And this approach has led to a much deeper level of understanding, I think. We see students actually transferring these skills between modules now. We see them actually engaging with the statistics side of things because they're having to understand what it is they're asking for from the computer, not just clicking on some things, getting a box and saying, oh, well, look, that magic p-value is less than 0.05, we're all good. They're customizing their figures much more. They're really investing and making them pretty. And I think that's largely because they're allowed to be creative in a way that they possibly weren't before. They're having to do problem solving because there will not be the first time you run a script, there will always be errors. So they're having to problem solve, and that's giving them a little bit more independence with their analysis. And because they're that depth of understanding, they're starting to relate these analyses back to questions in the biological sciences. They're starting to try and tell stories with them. And overall, they have been saying that they're finding this more satisfying than previous year groups have. And the other key thing that this approach has really built is ownership. I'm guiding them through the building of their script, but in the end, that is their script. They've written it, it's their piece of analysis. That gives them ownership over that piece of work, which I think has really been quite helpful in their move towards becoming independent researchers. So that's all I'm really going to say on the topic. Thank you for listening. I'd be really interested to know what your data science / analysis needs are. Could an approach like this work for any of you? I have put a resource up here. So this is a link to our central R resources page. So you can access my workbook here. You can also access colleagues of mine, their workbook as well for the second year. Students work through these at their own pace. I'm very happy to share these resources. All I would ask is that if you do use them, you let me know and let me know how you get on with them, just for future improvement, that kind of thing. I have also created a Padlet for anyone specifically interested in data science's angles, just to help us connect and to have any further discussions if this goes beyond the current session. But yeah, thank you for listening.
Ellen, thank you very much. That's another fantastic session. And I think people are keen to, if you've got the URL, if you can paste it into the chat, and then we can add it to the Padlet for the conference as well. So
Cool.
we've got a few questions. We've got a couple of minutes. So Mary's asking, a lot of teaching staff have similar challenges where students follow instructions procedurally, sort of recipe fashion, and not always with deep learning. Is there an article about your case study? Have you published about this elsewhere?
It's in one of my big heap of things to do over the summer. So I'm hoping to. I will probably publish a piece at least in THE Campus when I get a moment. But yeah, it's the to-do heap is ever growing, and I need to, but I haven't yet. But yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I always sort of encourage people to think about, you don't need to necessarily go for a paper straight away as well. Blogs are also really helpful. Any ways to communicate your learning are always valuable. I think there's lots of comments in the chat. One from Colette: great employability skills in data analytics. Do your students see statistics before level 4?
Before level 4, so they will start to as of next year, I think. So so at foundation year, we're bringing in a skills module where I think they'll start to learn a little bit, maybe a little bit of t-tests, that kind of thing. Nothing too daunting. Other than that, it'll just be what's in the A-level syllabus.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm sure everybody's going to be having a look at those resources too. So that sounds super valuable.